All right, so get ready, because today we're going deep into the sometimes puzzling world of psychiatry with Psychiatry Made Ridiculously Simple.
By William Good and Jefferson Nelson.
That's right. And just like the title suggests, this book is all about making psychiatry, well, a little less ridiculously complicated.
It's a great resource for anyone who wants to learn more about mental health, whether you're a student, a professional, or just someone who's curious about the human mind.
And it definitely uses humor to help make those complex topics a bit more digestible.
Which is something I appreciate because, let's face it, psychiatry can be pretty heavy stuff.
No kidding. But that's why we're here, right? To break it down and have some fun while we're at it.
Exactly. So let's dive right in with some of the terms you've probably heard before but might not fully understand.
Like akathisia.
Akathisia.
Now, I'll be honest, I had to look that one up myself. It's more than just feeling restless.
Yeah, it's actually a side effect of certain medications, particularly antipsychotics.
I think most people would just assume they were a bit anxious if they felt like that.
And that's the problem. It often gets missed or misdiagnosed.
But it's important to recognize akathisia because it can be very distressing for patients.
And it can lead to people stopping their medication, which can obviously have serious consequences.
Absolutely. So that's one we definitely need to be aware of.
Now, how about a term that might hit closer to home for some listeners? Carve-out.
This one's not about surgery, right?
Oh, no, not at all. This one has to do with insurance companies and how they often limit mental health coverage.
Which is a huge problem because it makes accessing mental health care even more difficult and expensive.
Essentially, they're saying that mental health isn't as important as physical health, which is just not true.
It's like they're carving out mental health from the bigger picture of healthcare.
Exactly, and that can have really negative consequences for people who need treatment.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about akathisia and carve-outs.
Okay.
Now let's move on to another intriguing term, flight of ideas.
This one's a bit more descriptive, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. It paints quite a vivid picture in your mind.
It refers to the rapid and often chaotic flow of thoughts that can occur during a manic episode.
It's like your thoughts are racing a mile a minute, jumping from one topic to another without any clear connection.
Precisely. And this can be very confusing and overwhelming for the person experiencing it, as well as for those around them.
And then there are defense mechanisms. Those clever ways our minds try to protect us from uncomfortable feelings.
Ah, yes. These are like mental strategies we unconsciously use to cope with stress, anxiety, or even trauma.
So it's like our mind's way of shielding us from things that might be too difficult to face head on.
Exactly. And while defense mechanisms can be helpful in the short term, they can become problematic if they start to interfere with our daily lives.
That makes sense. So now let's put ourselves in the shoes of a psychiatrist for a moment. Imagine you're faced with a patient who's raging and incoherent.
It's a scenario that many mental health professionals encounter, and it can be quite challenging.
But Psychiatry Made Ridiculously Simple actually walks us through the steps of a psychiatric evaluation, just like a real-life case.
It provides a really practical framework for assessing someone's mental state.
So where do we even begin with something like that?
Well, the first step is to assess the patient's orientation.
Which means figuring out if they know who they are, where they are, and what time it is. Basically, their awareness of their surroundings.
Exactly. It's the foundation of a mental status exam. Because if someone is disoriented, it can be a sign of a serious underlying condition.
Then we move on to evaluating their intellectual functioning, right?
That's right. This involves assessing their ability to answer simple questions, follow instructions, and engage in problem solving.
It gives us a sense of their cognitive abilities and how well their mind is working.
From there, we look at memory, both recent and distant.
Because memory problems can be an indicator of various neurological or psychological issues.
Next, we consider their affect, which refers to their emotional expression.
Are they displaying emotions that are appropriate to the situation, or is there a disconnect between their words and their feelings?
Exactly. It's like observing their emotional temperature, if you will.
And then we delve into the most fascinating part, in my opinion, thought content. The actual thoughts running through their mind.
This is where things can get really insightful. We want to understand if their thoughts are organized and logical, or if there are signs of delusions, hallucinations, or unusual beliefs.
It's like getting a glimpse into their inner world and trying to make sense of their experiences.
And to help with this, the book even includes a handy table summarizing key findings in different psychotic disorders.
Oh, that's really useful, especially for those who are new to psychiatry.
It's like a cheat sheet to help you connect the dots between symptoms and potential diagnoses.
Now, speaking of diagnoses, did you know that a significant percentage of adults experience depression at some point in their lives.
It's true, depression is much more common than many people realize.
And this book helps us understand the difference between pathological grief, which can last for years and significantly impair someone's life, and normal grieving, which is a natural response to loss.
That's a really important distinction because it highlights the need to recognize when grief becomes something more serious, something that requires professional help.
It also delves into the risk factors for suicide, which is such a crucial topic.
Absolutely, and it provides valuable insights into warning signs and preventative measures.
For example, did you know that recent losses like the death of a loved one or a job loss can significantly increase the risk of suicide?
It's a reminder that we need to be attuned to those around us who might be struggling and offer support when needed.
So we've covered depression and suicide now. Let's talk about anxiety, that feeling of worry and unease that we all experience from time to time.
But the book goes beyond just general anxiety. It actually breaks it down into different types, primary and secondary anxiety disorders.
So what's the difference?
Well, primary anxiety disorders are the ones we typically think of, like phobias, panic attacks, and generalized anxiety disorder.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about secondary anxiety disorders?
These are anxiety disorders that develop as a result of another medical condition or even certain medications.
So it's like our bodies can sometimes trigger anxiety even when there's no obvious external threat.
Exactly. And this highlights the importance of a thorough evaluation to determine the root cause of someone's anxiety.
Now, we can't talk about mental health without talking about pain, right?
Absolutely. Pain is a complex experience that can be both physical and psychological.
And the book dives into some really interesting aspects of pain, like the placebo effect.
Where the power of belief can actually lead to pain relief.
It's remarkable how our minds can influence our physical sensations.
And then there's hypochondriasis, where someone is constantly worried about having a serious illness, even when medical tests come back normal.
It's like their anxiety takes over and amplifies every little ache and pain.
But it's important to remember that their distress is real, even if there's no identifiable medical cause.
And then there's conversion disorder, which is even more fascinating.
This is where psychological distress manifests as physical symptoms like sudden paralysis or blindness with no medical explanation.
Wow, that's mind-boggling. It's like the mind is trying to communicate its distress through the body.
Exactly. It's a powerful example of the mind-body connection.
And then there's malingering, which is intentionally faking or exaggerating symptoms for personal gain.
That's right. It's important to distinguish this from genuine distress.
So understanding these nuances can help us navigate the complex world of pain and recognize that it's not always straightforward.
Definitely. Now let's move on to eating disorders, a topic that's often shrouded in misunderstanding.
Yeah, and the book tackles eating disorders with sensitivity and insight, going beyond those simplistic explanations we often hear.
It breaks down the diagnostic criteria for anorexia nervosa and bulimia in a way that's easy to understand.
And they even use a clever acronym to help us remember those key features.
Low form, loss of weight, fear of obesity, refusal to eat, and so on.
Those mnemonics are so helpful for remembering all this information.
But what I appreciate most is that the book explores the psychological and developmental roots of eating disorders.
Because it's not just about vanity or wanting to be thin, there are much deeper emotional and psychological issues at play.
Exactly. Now, let's shift gears and talk about addiction, another complex issue that the book approaches with a nuanced perspective.
And they outline the 3 key phases of treatment.
Starting with detoxification, which is the initial step of managing withdrawal symptoms.
Then there's rehabilitation, which focuses on addressing the psychological and behavioral aspects of addiction.
And finally, support, which is the ongoing process of maintaining sobriety.
So it's a holistic approach to treatment, recognizing that addiction is a multifaceted issue.
Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. The book explores the body-mind connection, where medical problems can actually mimic psychiatric disorders.
Wait, really? So you're saying something like a thyroid imbalance could cause symptoms that look like anxiety or even mania?
Exactly. It's mind-blowing to think about.
So it's crucial to consider all possible factors, both physical and mental, when evaluating someone's symptoms.
Absolutely. And to help us remember this, the book introduces another helpful mnemonic, 123-MEDCL.
That stands for metal poisoning, infections, endocrine disorders, cardiovascular problems, and more.
It's a great reminder that sometimes what appears to be a mental health issue could actually stem from something physical.
So it's like a checklist to ensure we're considering all angles.
Precisely. Now, let's venture into the realm of personality disorders, which can make relationships, let's just say, interesting.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
The book helps us navigate this complex terrain by introducing yet another handy acronym, BAD SHAPE.
I love how they use mnemonics to make all this information easier to remember.
So BAD SHAPE stands for the different types of personality disorders: borderline antisocial dependent, schizoid histrionic avoidant, paranoid empathetic failure, and passive aggressive.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack, but it's helpful to have a framework for understanding these different personality patterns.
For example, people with borderline personality disorder often experience intense, unstable relationships, struggle with self-image, and have difficulty regulating their emotions.
It's like their emotional responses are on a roller coaster, up and down, intense and unpredictable.
Then you have individuals with antisocial personality disorder who tend to disregard the rights of others, engage in reckless or even criminal behavior, and lack empathy and remorse for their actions.
Like they have a different moral compass.
And then there are the narcissists with their inflated sense of self-importance, need for admiration, and lack of empathy.
It's like they're constantly seeking validation and attention.
It's important to remember that these are just broad descriptions, and individuals with personality disorders are diverse.
So a diagnosis doesn't define a person, but it can offer valuable insights into their struggles.
Speaking of struggles, the book doesn't limit itself to just describing disorders. It also explores various treatment options.
Which is great because it gives us a sense of hope and possibility.
So let's start with psychotherapy, which encompasses a wide range of approaches, each with its own unique perspective.
Like dynamic psychotherapy, which focuses on uncovering those unconscious conflicts that might be driving our behaviors.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, uncovering those hidden patterns and experiences that shape our thoughts and actions.
Then there's behavioral therapy, which is all about modifying learned behaviors that contribute to mental health issues.
It's about identifying those unhealthy patterns and developing new, healthier coping strategies.
And we can't forget about cognitive therapy, which targets those negative thought patterns that can fuel our anxiety and depression.
It's about challenging those distorted thoughts and replacing them with more balanced and realistic ones.
It's like retraining our brains to think more positively.
And then there's pharmacotherapy, which involves using medications to manage symptoms and restore chemical imbalances in the brain.
The book provides a comprehensive overview of the different types of psychiatric medications available.
Like antipsychotics for psychosis, antidepressants for depression, lithium for mood stabilization, and anxiolytics for anxiety.
It's important to note that medications are often most effective when combined with psychotherapy.
Absolutely, they work best together.
And we shouldn't forget about electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, which has a bit of a controversial history.
But it's actually a highly effective treatment for severe depression and other mental health conditions that haven't responded to other treatments.
So it's important to keep an open mind and consider all options.
Definitely, this diversity of treatment modalities emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to mental health.
It's about finding what works best for each individual.
Exactly, and that's what I appreciate about Psychiatry Made Ridiculously Simple. It gives us a broad overview of the field while also highlighting the individual nature of mental health.
And I think it does a great job of making these complex topics accessible and even engaging.
It's not just a dry textbook, it's a conversation starter.
And it encourages us to view mental health with empathy and curiosity.
Which is so important because we all have mental health and we all deserve to understand it better.
Absolutely. Picking up where we left off last time, I was really fascinated by how much emphasis the book puts on the connection between physical and mental health.
Oh, absolutely. It's something that's often overlooked.
It's easy to just focus on the psychological symptoms and forget that there might be an underlying medical condition contributing to the problem.
Exactly, like in that case study you mentioned earlier where the patient's anxiety and mood swings were actually caused by a thyroid problem.
Right. It really highlights the importance of taking a holistic approach to diagnosis and treatment.
And to help with that, the book gives us a handy mnemonic to remember those medical conditions that can mimic psychiatric symptoms.
Oh, yeah. 123 MEDCL. What does that stand for again?
So it stands for metal poisoning, infections, endocrine disorders, like we just talked about, cardiovascular issues.
Oh, right. And then what else?
Lung problems, electrolyte imbalances, and a few others.
Wow. It's like a checklist to make sure we're considering all the bases.
Exactly. It's a reminder to not jump to conclusions and to rule out any potential physical causes before focusing solely on the psychological aspects.
It makes you realize how complex the human body is and how everything is interconnected.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of interconnectedness, the book also delves into the various treatment modalities available for mental health conditions.
Which is great because it gives us a sense of hope and possibility, you know?
It's like opening up a toolbox filled with different tools to address these challenges.
So let's start with psychotherapy, which encompasses a wide range of approaches, each with its own unique perspective and techniques.
Right, like dynamic psychotherapy, which focuses on those deep-seated unconscious conflicts that might be influencing our thoughts and behaviors.
It's like digging into our past to understand how it's shaping our present.
Exactly. Then you have behavioral therapy, which is all about modifying those learned behaviors that are contributing to the problem.
So it's about breaking those unhealthy patterns
Yeah.
and replacing them with healthier ones.
Precisely. And then there's cognitive therapy, which targets those negative and often distorted thought patterns that can fuel anxiety and depression.
So it's like retraining our brains to think more positively and realistically.
Exactly. These different forms of psychotherapy offer diverse pathways to healing and growth, and the choice of which one to use depends on the individual's needs and goals.
And of course, we can't forget about pharmacotherapy, the use of medications to manage symptoms.
Right. The book provides a comprehensive overview of the different types of psychiatric medications available.
Like antipsychotics for psychosis, antidepressants for depression, lithium for mood stabilization, and anxiolytics for anxiety.
It's important to note, though, that medications are often most effective when combined with psychotherapy.
So it's not just about popping pills, it's about addressing the underlying psychological issues as well.
Exactly. Medication can help manage symptoms and stabilize mood, allowing individuals to engage more fully in therapy.
And then there's electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, which sometimes gets a bad rap.
Yeah, it's often portrayed negatively in movies and TV shows.
But in reality, it's a safe and effective treatment for severe depression and other mental health conditions that haven't responded to other treatments.
It's definitely something to consider when other options have been exhausted.
This diversity of treatment modalities really emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to mental health.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works best for each individual, tailoring the treatment to their specific needs and circumstances.
And I think that's one of the most empowering messages of this book, that there is hope and there are options available.
It encourages us to take an active role in our mental health care, to ask questions, to advocate for ourselves, and to seek out the support we need.
You know, it's kind of like taking ownership of our mental well-being just as we would our physical health.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important message to leave our listeners with.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into Psychiatry Made Ridiculously Simple, I'm really struck by how much ground we've covered.
I know. It's amazing how much information is packed into this book, right?
And they managed to do it in a way that's both informative and entertaining.
Yeah, the humor definitely helps to make those tough topics a little easier to digest.
So before we sign off, what were some of the key takeaways for you?
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is the importance of destigmatizing mental illness, you know?
Oh, absolutely. The book really emphasizes that mental health is just as important as physical health.
And there's no shame in seeking help.
And it really challenges those societal biases that often prevent people from getting the support they need.
Exactly. Like, mental illness isn't a sign of weakness or a character flaw. It's a medical condition that deserves to be treated with the same compassion and understanding as any other health concern.
And speaking of treatment, I was really impressed by the comprehensive overview of different treatment modalities.
Right. The book covers everything from psychotherapy and medication to ECT and alternative therapies.
And it really emphasizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to mental health.
It's about finding what works best for each individual, taking into account their unique needs and circumstances.
And I think that's really empowering for people to know that they have options.
You know, another takeaway for me was the reminder that mental health is a spectrum.
Right? It's not just black and white. It's not about being normal or abnormal.
We all fall somewhere on that spectrum, and we all experience mental health challenges at some point in our lives.
Exactly. So it's about recognizing when we need help and not being afraid to reach out.
And the earlier we seek help, the better.
Because early intervention can make a huge difference in preventing those issues from becoming more severe.
And just as importantly, we need to create a culture where it's okay to talk about mental health.
Right. We need to break down those barriers of stigma and shame so people feel comfortable seeking support.
And Psychiatry Made Ridiculously Simple really helps to do that by providing us with the knowledge and language to have those conversations.
And it empowers us to advocate for ourselves and others.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to encourage our listeners to keep learning.
Yeah, keep asking questions and keep exploring the world of mental health.
And remember, you're not alone. There's a whole community of support out there.
And Psychiatry Made Ridiculously Simple is a great starting point for anyone who wants to learn more.
Absolutely. So until next time, Keep those minds open, keep those hearts compassionate, and keep those conversations flowing.
And remember, taking care of your mental health is one of the most important things you can do for yourself.
Well said, and thank you for joining us on this journey.